I now am on what we'd say day 8, or the day after the end of the fast. So when I broke the fast, because lots of people asked about it, I had some bone broth, because first of all it's got quite a lot of nutrients in it. It's got lots of collagen, which has lots of glycine in it, which is very gentle on the gut lining, because the gut lining's only one cell thick anyway. And towards the end of the fast, the gut bacteria will have started to go pretty crazy, and they will do things like eat the mucus that line the gut, and they probably would even start to eat into the lining. But again, nobody really understands the gut bacteria, particularly in what they do when it comes to fasting. Then after that, I had an egg and some avocado, because it's not a good idea to end a fast like that with meat or dairy, because it's too difficult to digest. Also, things like carbohydrates, which would be anything from even quite a sweet fruit like an apple or a banana, all the way up to a takeaway cake, chocolate, potatoes and such like. The reason not to end a fast with that is because my body's so used now to making ketones, using ketones and fat as fuel. Insulin's been really low because the body's been making a small amount of glucose itself, which it needs for basal functions. Putting all that carbohydrate in and making a massive insulin spike will be massively stressful on the body, because the cells are not used to all of this glucose. And also there's a relationship between insulin and sodium levels, so it can, in very severe cases, affect the heart. Also, doing something like that can trigger something called refeeding syndrome, which you can sort of guess what that means. It's just uncontrolled sort of binge eating, which again is going to be really hard on the body in this particular state. Also, when it comes to other foods to add at the end of the fast, there are other things which aren't a good idea either, which would be things like nuts, which can be difficult to digest because of the coating, seeds, other vegetables like kale and spinach that have got quite a lot of oxalates. Things like broccoli have got quite a few interesting compounds in, so broccoli is not necessarily a good food. But on the other hand, the gut bacteria really like the fibre in foods like that. So I chose some courgette, some grated up courgette, which is pretty unallergenic, and then some cucumber as well, and also some sauerkraut, because the live sauerkraut that you can buy is probiotic, and also there are some so-called friendly bacteria in there as well, and the bacteria that are in the stomach already like the cabbage. So all went well with the ending of the fast. Another thing that can happen that's really common is whatever you eat, you just poo straight out, so that is a problem as well. So I had to be quite careful deciding what I broke the fast with. I also found this probiotic coconut drink to have, and I put some black currants in it for a bit of vitamin C, and because also the gut bacteria like the polyphenols in the coats of coloured berries. So I had a little bit of that as well. Then after my meal breaking the fast, I had to teach a Pilates class, so I was quite careful about not eating too much, because of obviously I didn't want to have an accident in the class. And then afterwards, when I got back, I just had a little bit of the same, because I don't want to overburden the system. That night I slept really well, because the vagus nerve is linked to the stomach, so when you eat, the stomach stretches and it sends certain satiety signals to the brain, but it also stimulates the vagus nerve, which is part of the parasympathetic nervous system, which is the rest and digest, so it's kind of the calming side. So sleeping was better on the last night. Another reason not to eat a lot of food late in the evening or even after a fast is that the melatonin, which is the going to sleep hormone, shuts the pancreas down a little bit, because it wants to go to sleep as well, so that the body can become a bit insulin resistant and make blood sugar go up and stay up, which isn't healthy either. But also all the food being there uses up energy to be digested, where the body actually wants to use sleep to repair things, and if it's busy trying to digest food, that's at the expense of tissue that needs to be repaired. Something which I didn't mention during the fast is about day 6 or 5, the body starts to produce stem cells, because, as I've said quite a few times about the autophagy that breaks down old and damaged cells, of course it's going to break down good tissue as well. So this plus all of this breaking down triggers the stem cells to come out, and they'll go to wherever is needed in the body for repair, and by a mechanism that doesn't matter for the moment, they turn into that particular tissue type, and then it's a way to start to regrow new tissue. So that doesn't happen until towards the end of the fast, so you have to do it for quite a long time to get the effect. So at the moment my body's busy repairing any damage that there is. Also, the other important thing is respect to hormones and metabolism. As I said in an earlier video, during a fast, thyroid hormone or T3 goes down and reverse T3 goes up, and that just slows down the metabolism from the thyroid's end. However, other hormones go up, like cortisol and adrenaline and noradrenaline, and they speed the metabolism back up again. And also noradrenaline, cortisol and adrenaline help with fat breakdown and usage. Also, as I've said before, growth hormone goes up as well, and growth hormone does lots of things, including repairing and protecting tissue, but it also opposes insulin. So when growth hormone is high, it's easier for fat to be broken down and to be got into cells and used as energy. Also, growth hormone has other effects like BDNF. It's good for mood and well-being. So at the moment, because I still haven't eaten any carbohydrates, my insulin and blood sugar will still be low. My body's still in ketosis because I tested with the strips this morning. However, I haven't got the agitated feeling of the cortisol and the adrenaline now making me want to seek out food. So that side's calmed down a bit. So that'll be another reason why I slept better last night, because the stress hormone side has come down, the sympathetic, and the parasympathetic's gone back up. In order to understand about metabolism more fully and body weight set point and what will happen to me afterwards, am I going to suddenly gain all the weight back and more, what's going to happen? I'll make a separate video, because talking about insulin and leptin and all of that comes under a separate category. On another topic, I also was working with one of my Parkinson clients today, and she has a really interesting bookshelf which we always talk about, and in the bookshelf I found this really old book from 1971 called The Fast Diet, and it's written by an MD. So here's the book here, and I browsed through it really quickly, and it was this really interesting account of this person that wanted to prove the medical system wrong about eating and diet and such like. And it's his account of different length fasts and how he refed, and he accounts all of his mood, lots of things that happened, his libido, lots of different length fasts that he did. And it's quite long. I haven't read it properly because I need to buy the book really, because I didn't want to take my client's book, but from what I browsed through, it was a really interesting read, and lots of the stuff that he described happened to me in my fast. Also, another thing which I didn't mention was, in the fast, anything unimportant became of no value. I couldn't stand anything boring or pointless, only things that were important. So watching crap telly and stuff like that, I just couldn't deal with, or boring conversation. And he accounted that in his book. But his book is, I haven't gone through it properly, but I'm really interested to read it, because back in 1971, doctors and patients knew about fasting for benefits, but nobody wanted to make it mainstream. So now I'm off to teach some more Pilates, and I'm going to gymnastics, and I haven't done any proper exercise since last Saturday. So I'll either be amazing or absolutely useless. I don't know, we'll see. Anyway, thanks for watching, and I've got more videos to come, because with this fasting and this biochemistry, there's so much to say. And for some people it's all totally new, and a lot of it doesn't quite make sense unless you've got the whole picture, but I can't give people everything all at once because they'll get massively confused. So thanks for watching, and look out for the next video or 2 or 3. Hello, this is now 6 days after the end of the fast, so once again thank you to everybody who's been supportive. In this video I'm going to show some photos because I've conveniently hidden them in a video. So first of all, my mum and my family won't see them on Facebook, and also people that don't want to see stuff like that because it's sort of a bit weird really. But again, there obviously are the stupid fuckers who say, well, how do I know that you actually did it? Fine, that's fair enough. Also, in this video, I'm going to talk about body weight set point, because that's why I am posting the photos, because I've done some from day 0 to day 7 to today, just to show people that fasting doesn't totally mess up your metabolism and you don't gain all the weight back and more straight away. As I said in another post about actual weight loss, it's a mixture of fat, water, broken proteins, connective tissue, which would come under the category of loose skin or cellulite, dead bacteria, and other things as well. And due to thermodynamics, realistically, you can only lose about half a pound of body fat per day doing fasting. I appreciate that for much bigger people who say are maintaining their body weight at, say, 18 stone or something and eating 4,000 or 5,000 calories a day, if they suddenly did a 7-day fast, the amount of fat that they'd lose would be significantly greater. But that's again comes into this principle of the body weight set point. Also, I also had a really good chat with a GP on Friday about leptin and thyroid, because it started because I just asked her what % of people who come to you claiming they can't lose weight or they have issues, how many of them do actually turn out to have an underactive thyroid? And she said a very small %. Even though in another video I did say that the test you get from the GP is not comprehensive, because you only get T4 and TSH, where if you pay for a test, which is actually not that expensive, you can get T3, reverse T3, thyroid antibodies, and get a better picture of the thyroid. And again, I don't know the answer for how many people who have the full test, whether there is a thyroid problem, but still you can have a problem with the thyroid, but it's not necessarily being underactive, as in it's not producing enough thyroxine. It can be to do with how the hormones are being converted. Then we were talking about insulin and leptin and how they actually do play a big role in people who get stuck at a certain body weight, because insulin resistance is the common denominator in pretty much all obesity studies. So that is a big driving force. And then you can get leptin resistance on top, but they usually come together. So we were just talking about how possibly at the doctors having a thyroid test for weight issues is the wrong blood test. And again, like most things, if you want to get your insulin measured or leptin, then you can pay, and it's not that expensive and it's not difficult to interpret. The other thing the GP and I were chatting about was hormone levels, because I did tell her about the fast and she was a bit surprised. And I said I didn't have any medical supervision because it's just wasting NHS time and I don't really need it. So she was very interested in all of the things that I've been measuring and doing. And I was asking her about female hormones and hormones that go out of balance, because that's one thing I don't know the answer to. Does fasting or extreme fasting mess up female hormones? Because lots of things do. And she had a really good answer. She was saying, well, that covers loads of hormones, from thyroid to testosterone to all sorts, because nobody actually gets a baseline measurement when they're healthy or when they're in their 20s. So loads of people don't actually know what their level should be. And they are quite varied from person to person. So the idea from that is to have a blood test if you have a chance when you're healthy, so you know what your level should be. Then if things start to go wrong or you feel tired or whatever, at least you've got something to go back to. So it isn't cheap to get blood tests, but they're not expensive either, and they can save a lot of trouble later when something does go wrong. So here we have the pictures, and this is from day 1 to day 7. And that's kind of, I haven't date stamped them, but if people really wanted to see, I can have that in as well. And then I've got these ones here, which is day 7 to today, to show that nothing horrible has happened. Even quite a harsh fast like a 7 days would appear not to have at the moment done anything to the thyroid system, because it is probably just recovering now. I've got no idea about other hormones and periods and things. That's something I'll just have to wait and see. So there we go. So now for an explanation of the leptin and the insulin, and also about why fasting works and calorie restriction doesn't. There's the body weight set point, which is governed by many factors, including genetics, gender, and how much muscle you have. But the main driving factor is insulin and leptin. So I'll explain it now so you can understand what happens. So first of all, say if a person eats too much and too often and too many carbohydrates, this causes insulin to rise or be there all the time, and this tells the body to store fat. So this will go on for a certain amount of time, and then the fat cells swell and leptin is released, and this basically tells the brain we're too fat. And leptin's job is to suppress appetite and speed up metabolism. So the person stops eating, insulin goes down, and then the body goes back into energy using mode and uses the body fat. The other reason why this can be a problem is that swollen fat cells produce inflammatory cytokines, which then in time promote more fat storage and thyroid issues as well. So it's not an advantage for the body to let these fat cells stay swollen. On the other side, if somebody eats less, loses fat, insulin goes down, body fat is used, and then because the fat cells are depleted, leptin levels go down and appetite goes up, metabolism goes down, and the person returns to their body weight set point. So loads and loads of studies have been done on this when they've tried to make people gain 10% of their body weight on purpose, and it got more and more and more difficult. And then eventually, when the experiment finished, they went back to their own original set point. And this was done on animals, college students, prisoners, all sorts. And they found that the metabolism went up by about 500 calories per day when this person had gained 10% of their body weight. And the converse, the same happened when they made people lose 10% of their body weight. This time the metabolism slowed down by about 300 calories a day, and the person went back to their original set point weight. So it's a bit like a thermostat, the body weight set point, and it can be changed. And it's also something that people who do, say, get stuck in a fat trap, it didn't just happen overnight, it can happen over decades, and gradually the thermostat goes up and up and up and up and up as the body adjusts to the new body weight set point. But also, if people lose weight and maintain it, the body weight set point can then reset to that lower weight. Also, the other thing which is important in this is how long the weight has been there for, because if it's somebody in their 20s or 30s that just goes on a cruise and gains a lot of weight, they'll probably lose it just as quickly, whereas if somebody's gradually gained a pound or two per year over decades, the fat has been there for much longer and it's more difficult for it to be lost. But it's still perfectly doable. Now, this system can become broken, and this is when the person becomes insulin resistant. So it's insulin that causes insulin resistance, like it's antibiotics that cause antibiotic resistance, and it's drugs which cause drug resistance. It's no different when it comes to insulin. So in general, to become insulin resistant, it's from people eating too much and too often and too much carbohydrate. But in a way, that's what people were told to do. Around the late 1960s, 1970s, people were told to eat lots of bread and whole grains, so they did. And then this is what happened. Nobody actually told people they need to eat 5 or 6 meals a day. That's something that just seems to have become more and more mainstream these days. Also, it's possible to stress yourself somewhat into insulin resistance because the stress hormones are always pushing the blood sugar up, and then the insulin has to come and try and push them down again. So it's there all the time and the body becomes resistant to insulin. The other thing which drives insulin resistance is fatty liver. They often, or most of the time, come together, and the fatty liver can build up over many years. So it's like the silent scream of the liver because nobody knows that this is going on. It's asymptomatic, and then after a while lots of fat or triglycerides start to appear in the blood. So there's insulin resistance being driven at the level of the liver as well. So when a person becomes insulin resistant and they have these fat cells which are swollen and pumping out leptin, what happens now is the person also becomes leptin resistant, because leptin causes leptin resistance. So this means that the brain, or the hypothalamus, this where the leptin receptor is, it starts to ignore the leptin, and the person's appetite stays high and their metabolism goes down. And then that adds to this problem of not being able to lose weight. The other player in this is sugar, as in sucrose or table sugar, because it's made out of glucose and fructose, whereas other carbohydrates such as rice and such like, they're just lots and lots and lots of chains of glucose, whereas the fructose that comes with sugar adds another element into this problem of insulin resistance and leptin resistance. So first of all, the body can only store 15 grams of fructose, and when there's extra, something has to get done with it. Whereas with glucose, it's got somewhere to go. Cells can use it for energy, it can get stored in muscles, in liver. So first of all, what the fructose does is it blocks the leptin receptor in the brain, so it makes the leptin resistance worse. So we have no appetite suppression. That's why it's so easy to overeat on sweets and desserts and such like. But also, what the liver can do is make this fructose into fat. So we have this other force driving the fatty liver, which then drives more insulin resistance. And then this makes this problem even worse. So really, there's not much you can do about the leptin. You can limit how much sugar you have, of course, or better, cut it out completely. So really, the way to tackle this problem is to go for the insulin, because that is something that can be controlled. When it comes to restricting calories, this is something which has gone on since the 1960s, and no matter how much research gets published, people still keep talking about calories, and there is no calorie receptor in the body. It doesn't know what it is. It relies on hormones to have a response when particular macronutrients are eaten, such as sugar, fats or protein. So pretend for now that the fridge is the liver, or the small fuel tank, and the deep freeze is the fat store. And most people don't go into the freezer until they've run out of whatever they want in the fridge, or other people have their freezers downstairs or outside, and it's a bit of a nuisance to go and get things from the freezer. And the body's just the same with the body fat. It won't use it unless the fridge is empty. So for example, if somebody's eating 1,200 calories from food in 3 meals a day, insulin is being stimulated reasonably regularly. So what happens is the body will use it, but from the fridge only. So the metabolism drops, the fat stores aren't used, so the person doesn't dip in to their deep freeze. This graph here is the randomized controlled study of, I can't remember how many thousands of women it was, over 9 years. And these women were told to eat 300 calories less per day and to exercise more. And the researchers predicted that over the course of a year, the people should lose 30 pounds a year. And after 9 years, as you can see in the graph, the total weight loss in the group of women who were told to reduce calories is £0.5 pound. Yet people still keep doing this, or keep talking about calories. This happens with a variety of things in nutrition. So the two most serious ones that I can think of would be, first of all, the one where, when white bread was invented, the media or whoever told the population somehow that poor people ate brown bread. So naturally, people then switched to eating white bread. So it was a bit of a manipulation there. And pretty much everybody, regardless of being vegan or keto or whatever, agrees that white bread is bad. The other example when this happened was when there was a big glut of cottonseed oil and also other seed oils. And then some bright spark thought, rather than wasting millions and millions and millions of tons of these vegetable oils, let's feed them to people. And that's when trans fats, margarines, were invented. And people were told that these were the so-called healthy fats, the vegetable fats. And I was reading a study the other day, and researchers predict that eating trans fats for 40 years has killed or harmed possibly 100,000 people per year. And thankfully nowadays most people understand that margarine is produced industrially. These seed oils aren't healthy and clean and nice. They've been processed, bleached, coloured, all sorts, so they taste nice. Whereas now it's been accepted once again that eating butter probably was completely fine after all. So let's get into how fasting works. So say if somebody's taking in 1,200 calories a day from one meal a day, or one meal every 48 hours, or no food, or a low carbohydrate diet, what happens is insulin is low, the liver uses up all the glycogen, which means the fridge gets emptied, and now the person has to go into the fat store or the deep freeze. And when the body sees this giant deep freezer, like, oh wow, there's loads of energy here, same as you would do if you're at home, you wouldn't suddenly think, oh my gosh, I'm going to starve, I'll just eat. You just think, oh well, I'll just eat what's in the freezer then. And that's exactly what the body does. So because it's satisfied, it's got this supply of food or fuel, then the metabolism stays the same and the body burns fat and everything starts to work. And now, because I did say you can't do much about the leptin, because when people are undertaking this kind of way of living and avoiding sugar, the problem of the fructose blocking the leptin receptor has now gone away, and also because even though the fat cells are shrinking and producing less leptin, the problem of the leptin resistance starts to go away again. So when the person does need the leptin to inhibit the appetite, the receptor or the brain is going to respond properly. So we've managed to solve the leptin resistance and the insulin resistance and the fat loss problem in one go.